I'm Cheryl DeMars, and welcome to this session, Building a Healthier Workforce Starts with Leadership. And I'm joined today by Rochelle Myers, the Chief Growth Officer for WPS, and Gail Paul, the VP of Human Resources for Promega Corporation. And we're going to spend some time talking today about the impact of leadership on the health and well-being of employees. And we want this to be conversational, so I'll start with some questions, but if you have questions along the way, don't wait till the end. Mike will be Phil Donahue, and I sent Mike a little video of Phil Donahue running through the audience saying, is the caller there? So you know your part, Mike, thanks. So let me just start by introducing both Rochelle and Gail. Rochelle joined WPS as the Chief Growth Officer in 2023 and has over 2 decades of experience in healthcare and health insurance. Rochelle previously served in leadership roles for Accenture, Medica Health Plan, and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota. And her focus at WPS is to drive value-based innovation in service of WPS's customers and growth objectives. I also want to call out that WPS just received the Platinum Bell Seal from Mental Health America. And this is the highest award possible and recognizes employers who are committed to creating mentally healthy workplaces.
Oh, thanks.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks.
Gail Paul is Promega's Vice President of Human Resources and has been with Promega for 30 years. In that role, she oversees the daily operations of the Human Resources Department. Gail also serves on the board of directors for the Woods Hollow Children's Center, and prior to joining Promega, Gail held human resources roles at QTI and US Bank, both in Madison. Promega Corporation is also a recent award recipient. They were named a 2024 Biospace Best Places to Work award winner in the large company category. So congratulations to you and Promega. So my first question is going to channel Simon Sinek, and starting with why. I'm curious to know for your organizations, and if you want for yourselves, what's your why? What's the reason why each of your organizations, and then you personally, are invested in the health and well-being of your employees? Rochelle, do you want to start?
Sure, happy to. The journey that I've been on in my career has been maybe an interesting one, and maybe it applies to a lot of you that have been in healthcare, the journeys that you've been on with your employer groups. And I've always been a very mission-driven individual, and that's a huge part of the reason I'm in healthcare. I get that question a lot, like, why are you still in healthcare? It's just like, is progress really being made? And I'm like, there's progress being made, but there's a lot more that we can do. And fundamentally, I believe that the healthcare system is broken. When you look at the U.S. healthcare system relative to other industrialized nations, our outcomes aren't that great. We spend a lot of money. The employee experience, member experiences, it's not good, right? And I think that's the passion, right, of this group that's here today. And I've had personal experiences with family members, and just, you see how individuals and families get caught in the middle of a system that's fragmented and that just, it doesn't work. So personally, that's what drives me. And just a huge part of the reason I joined WPS, it was Wendy Perkins, our CEO. She's been with the company around 7 years. She was promoted last year to CEO. And my first conversation with her, I met with her and I'm like, she gets it. And she's a very mission-driven leader, very empathetic. And that's really what WPS is about. I mean, I know we have a portfolio of businesses. I lead the health insurance business, and I know sometimes like, health insurers, are you really trying to make things better? And that's part of my mission at WPS, like in doing it in the state of Wisconsin, in a local market, where all these employers and the local brands, we should all thrive together, right? I mean, that's how it should be at the end of the day. So that's what it's all about.
Great, thank you. Gail, what about for Promega Corporation, and if you want for you personally? Yeah. Why are you investing in employee health and well-being?
One of the things that has been, I would say, a cornerstone for Promega is it was really built around a place for people to come and self-actualize, right? So a place where people can come to work and they can learn more about themselves, they can learn more about the people that they work with, and obviously contribute to a larger initiative in what Promega does. And so from the very beginning, it was very clear that it was very important to Bill that people felt well taken care of. Bill Litton is our CEO and founder. Well taken care of, appreciated, and that they could be their authentic self when they were at work. So the programs that we've built over time support that feeling and that initiative. And so I think that's Promega's true why, is we want to make sure that our people feel well taken care of, so that the things that they worry about from a healthcare perspective can fall on a bigger shoulder than just their own. For me personally, I think it's probably the same thing for all of us, right? We worry about our own health, about our family's health, our children, if you have children, our aging parents, and we see the struggles that people have, and that it's hard to navigate. And so anything that we can do to help alleviate that or support that, or bring in assistance to help people through that is so important.
Yeah, I hear in both your responses empathy for your employees, genuine concern and care for your employees, a desire to make healthcare better as an insurer. And then in the last session, I also heard, I thought this was interesting too, it's so hard to get employees. We need them to stay healthy. We want to make sure that we kind of maximize the
Right.
health of our employees because they're hard to come by.
Right. Yeah, and that is a huge piece of it, right? They talked, the gentleman who was in the morning session talked a lot about cost, and that is a major component of it for sure. But I don't think we put that first necessarily. But it's a byproduct, right, of putting in programming and services that help your employees, that you can then save money that way as well.
I would agree with that. I think the other element, when I joined WPS last year, we spent a fair amount of time really defining our strategy for the organization, right? And top of mind is like, how are we going to grow? How are we going to make sure the company is sustainable? And one of the core pillars of our strategy is really focus on our employees, right? I mean, no business can grow, be sustainable, achieve your financial results, whatever it is, provide awesome service to your, the members or your customers, unless you have employees that are engaged. And that's the head, the heart, all of it, right? And the mental and physical health is core and center to that.
So let's get a little more specific and tell us, maybe each of you, about a successful strategy that your organization has implemented. Tell us what it was, kind of how it was received, and what the role of the leadership was in helping to promote that. Gail, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. I think the one that comes top of mind, and it was much talked about today, is we have a full on-site wellness center. And so this came out of, definitely out of leadership. Ash Anderson, who's here, is our Chief Medical Officer, was instrumental in starting our on-site wellness center. And our CEO and senior leadership team saw the vision of this and what it could provide for our employees, and the opportunities that it would give to not only keep people at work and productive, right, and healthy, but the convenience, the cost savings, and the resources for them and their families that this would bring. So I think from a leadership perspective, it was immediately brought out and supported at the top level of the organization. And we have a pretty flat organization, I would say, so it was not hard to get leadership support throughout the company. And the benefits that it has brought to our organization is immense. So we have 2 physician assistants, right? So we have Ash, who's our Chief Medical Officer. Then we have physical therapy. We have mental health counselors on site. And we have a phlebotomist and medical assistant and a full-scale lab that can support our employees, as well as physical therapy. So it has been life-changing for all of us, as I have a physical therapy appointment on Friday morning. So yeah, I think that's been our biggest, one of the programs that stands out the most to me and the most impactful to our overall organization.
How do you think it's impacting your employees?
I think the convenience, the safety of it, and the trust that they have in our providers is immense. Now, that didn't happen out of the gate. I think we had to hire strong providers. We had to build that trust with our employee base. and entice them to come in, right? So various programs throughout the year, we used a carrot a lot to get people to come in and use different services, and then word spreads, right? So if you're providing a good service, they feel like they can trust you, and they have that relationship that spreads through your employee population. And so we have, yeah.
You know, I am just in awe of how much that has changed. I remember a time when no one was doing on-site clinics, and those first few that started, there was all this concern about liability and confidentiality,
Right.
and would employees really use it because they'd be walking into the doctor's office at work, and God forbid a behavioral health provider, you know, behavioral health services. And I just think this has changed dramatically. It is, I mean, you're hearing as not just the presenters, but other people that are participants talking about this now as it's like commonplace.
Right.
It's amazing. Rochelle, how about from the perspective of WPS, tell us about something that you've done that's been successful and what the role of leadership has been.
Yeah, so I've been with the organization since last year. I'm going to give a shout out to my colleague Moira Close. She's on the board of the Alliance. She's out here in the audience. And what I'm about to speak about is really to her credit and her leadership. So as you had mentioned, we just recently won an award for our focus, you know, on mental health. And Moira started this initiative, you know, kind of coming out of COVID. And I'm sure you've all experienced this, you know, and especially employers that have a lot of like the remote workforce and that, and just understanding the mental health issues that have come through, you know, being isolated from people, having to work at home, not having that social interaction, that type of thing. So WPS moved down a path of starting to really think about, you know, what can we do to help our employees? You know, how do we help them navigate through this and come out on the other side where we've done something that's authentic and not just kind of a program, if you will, something that could be long lasting and sustainable. So it really kind of included 4 components. And I think the company's culture is really critical to any initiative that you're trying to drive forward on. If you want to make it part of the DNA of the company, embedded in the culture. So the first prong really revolves around vulnerability and trust, especially I think when you're dealing with people's health, mental health, or physical health. They need to know that they're working for a company that is creating that environment of trust and where they can be open about what they're feeling and who they are. So that is where our work started in bringing in a speaker and starting to create these conversations where employees could open up about how they're feeling, and we had leaders opening up and demonstrating the vulnerability, right, which invites them in to be part of it. So that was the first part. The second is really looking at your benefits and your policies as an organization and trying to figure out, you know, where can we do better, and certainly access to mental health providers I think has been a challenge. You know, for everybody. So trying to find new avenues for access to mental health providers. We were able to expand our network, leveraging telehealth, that type of thing. And then starting to create more on-site events and create, you know, welcoming employees back into the setting, not necessarily to have to work, but just get together with your colleagues and feel like you're part of that WPS family. So that's been a big part of it as well. And then, of course, the employee assistance programs that most of us have, and just making sure employees understand, you know, what the tools are that they have at their disposal, and this ongoing focus on vulnerability and trust and empathy in our culture. So, again, credit to Moira and the team for everything that they've done, but it's made such a tremendous impact on the organization. And again, you know, when you have employees that are feeling happier, they're feeling healthier, it's just better for the organization.
And they're more fun to work with.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And they're more driven too, right? They feel like they're part of something, and like we're all moving to a place together. And we're all humans. I think that was the other thing you and I talked about when we were prepping for this, right? It's people come to work every day. They're not robots. They're not widgets. So how do we get to know them on a human level and make them feel authentically valued and like they're part of something exciting?
I liked what you said about the role of leadership too. Wasn't just supporting the investment in some of the things that you did, policy changes, et cetera, it was about being vulnerable as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
And I think back over my career of the impact that vulnerable leaders have had on me, just kind of making it seem more okay to be vulnerable and to not be okay when you're not okay.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Let's talk about obstacles for a minute. Tell us about some of the obstacles that you faced, maybe related to those initiatives or other things, in trying to promote the health and well-being of your employees and what you've done to address them.
You want me? I can go.
Oh,
You
sure,
wanna
go ahead.
ping pong? I don't know. ROI always comes up. So we get that from a CFO or other, like, what is the ROI on this? And it's not, I'm not gonna be able to give you an ROI over the course of 12 months, 24, whatever it is, right? Sometimes it's fundamentally, you know it's the right thing to do as an organization and it's aligned with your mission. And there have been tons of studies done that demonstrate, your ability to make that investment in your employees pays back in dividends in terms of, how the culture of your organization, how your company performs, your ability to execute on your strategy and the like. So I think ROI has probably been one space, and then sometimes I think two, and I've seen this in different organizations, if you don't have an executive leadership team that's all aligned or bought into it, that can definitely make it challenging. So then it's like, how do you make progress? And I always, just as I've come through my career, and I think when you first start out, sometimes it's like you're leading teams and things and you're going through the motions and you're driving for the business results, and then the light switch goes on. And it's like, okay, we're all humans. Like, I want to get to know my employees on a human level. Like, I start my one-on-ones usually, or team meetings, the pulse check. How are you doing? How's the head? How's the heart? What's going on with your family? And I think each of us as individual leaders can make progress by engaging that way and starting to engage our teams that way. And that, it can be more of a grassroots thing as a leader, I think. So, I would just say if you don't have full buy-in of your executive leadership team or your company hasn't taken the step, there are things that you can do as an individual leader to make a difference.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gail, challenges that you'd want to reflect upon?
A couple things come to mind. I think one of the biggest challenges we have faced is building trust and getting people to align and believe in living a healthier lifestyle, and that it is important, and that us as an employer are not just saying that because of a dollar sign or because we want you more productive at work or we want you at work. Obviously those things are important, but that we truly care about you. I think the other lesson that really sticks out to me is listening to our employees. So we do a great job of bringing programming in, and we have great ideas, and we have got caught in that too, thinking, oh my God, this is a great idea. This could be really wonderful for our employees, but not truly understanding what their needs are. Or when you have a diverse population, right? Our world is diverse, and understanding the individual needs of employees, I think is a really big something you can step in pretty deeply if you're not listening and understanding what people need and meeting them where they're at, right? That changes as we age too, right? Of course, I've been at Promega a long time. When I started when I was 14, is that the age that we're saying? And so our needs change, right? And every age group and demographic has a very different need. So really listening to them and meeting them where they're at as much as we can.
So let's explore that a little bit more. I was thinking about this, the diversity of workforces. There's so many types of diversity, and when you're thinking about how to support employee health and well-being, there's a lot there.
Yes.
How are you addressing that? You mentioned meeting people where they're at, which I understand, but can you tell us some more details? How are you approaching that?
So we have ERGs, so employee resource groups, that, and little lesson learned, we started them initially within HR, right? Because we wanted we wanted to get people involved, and we're like, okay, tell us a little bit more about, from a recruitment standpoint, what can we do better, differently from a healthcare standpoint. So we formed these groups, and people came. But again, how are we building trust when we're forming the group, we're setting the agenda? So we have evolved to now we have employee-led resource groups, right? We're letting them create these groups on what's important to them. And we have a health equity group that was started by a group of employees, and it has been immensely helpful in them bringing together employees, having a safe place to talk about the things that they're facing with themselves, with their family members, and how can the employer support them? How can we as an employer, but also how can they support each other, right? Because they're getting support and benefit from other people who are going through the same thing. And the leadership, I think leadership responsibility in that is we have executive sponsors on each of those ERGs so that we're showing our support. We're not dictating what they're doing. We're not overseeing what they're doing. We're there as a conduit into the organization to help them when they want to bring in a challenge or they want to push something forward. And we're there to help them spearhead that. So I think that's been really beneficial to our organization.
Yes. Rochelle, do you have thoughts about how you're addressing the diversity of your workforce and still promoting employee health and well-being?
I would say it's been a very similar journey at WPS. I think connecting the work and the strategy to it, as I had mentioned, is important. So when you look at the employee resource groups and just the diversity of thought and experience that is there, I think something that can be equally satisfying that feeds into the health and well-being is knowing that they're heard, engaging them in the important work that's happening in the organization and the strategy very intentionally. So we do that by design with like some of our big initiatives and projects, and giving visibility to the folks that are part of those ERGs to have a voice with our executive leadership team and the like. So, but I do agree with you. A huge part of this is listening and not presuming that we as leaders know the answer to everything. I think the second part is making sure that you don't overwhelm employees with programs. We just streamlined a significant number of our programs internally because we can get program happy and it can just become too overwhelming and too much, and then people start to kind of disengage because it's overwhelming. So,
yes. You brought up COVID a little while ago. Let's talk about what's changed post-COVID when your workforce may be remote or hybrid. The old school, let's do a walking club at lunch kinds of things to promote well-being don't work so well in a remote environment. What are you seeing? What's changed in your organization as you've evolved post-COVID?
There you go. So our industry is a little different. We're a manufacturer, so people think of Promega sometimes as a which we are a biotech, but we are a manufacturing organization. So during COVID, probably 2/3 of our employees were still required to come on site every day. So we had our more of administrative folks that we sent home, set them up to work remotely, and then we had a sales force, sales and support force that were scattered throughout the United States that have always been remote. So COVID actually taught us a lot in that time. We created programs that were virtual. So our health professionals were seeing people virtually. We moved our orientation virtual. We created workout classes that were virtual, lots of things. And what we found is our field-based employees for the first time felt more connected than ever because they were getting the same resources and things that everybody was getting. So that was wonderful. And our on-site employees could access these things at various times as well. So the flexibility was really great. We're now really encouraging people to be on-site as much as possible, but still allowing that flexibility for those whose jobs can handle that. But we are still keeping some of that virtual programming in place because we found that it's been helpful and beneficial to many of our employees across all of those categories. And of course, we are big Microsoft user, so Teams is super important to us. And the way our campus is set up, with the bulk of our employees in Madison, we have 22 buildings in Madison. So it still is a very virtual world in some aspects because you can't run between buildings for meetings all the time, right? So there's always a Teams aspect to almost all meetings because people are in various places.
Rochelle, any changes from your perspective with WPS post-COVID?
Yeah, and I've come to just gaining an appreciation, and again, probably not all that dissimilar depending on what industry you're in. I mean, our workforce pretty much 100% moved to remote, and I know other companies I've worked with too, right? That was a time of like panic and innovation all at the same time, right? To try to figure, how do we work differently? How is this going to work? And then all the concerns, are we going to lose productivity? Or are people really going to work as much as they should be and all of that? So, and I think that's moderated, over time. But I agree with you. I mean, the technology has been incredibly important. Having reliable technology, people knowing how to use the technology. I think, as I had said earlier, not just jumping right into the work or the meeting at hand. So checking in with people and, having those conversations and trying to stay connected on a human level, I think is super important. But not all that dissimilar just in terms of, the approaches and that. I think we're now toying with the idea of, are there certain workers that we really want to have back on site in some, at least a couple of days a week, and there's no substitute, I think, particularly when you're working on strategy or you're trying to design new solutions or fix processes, to have people there in a room, kind of the energy feeding off of one another and co-creating. So that's something we're working on. One of our buildings, we're going through a renovation this year and trying to design those collaborative working spaces for people, so when they return, there's a different feel and vibe for it as well, and to create a space that will incent people to kind of want to be back. So that's another part of our strategy.
Go ahead. Rochelle, you mentioned finance guys earlier, and that made me think about, as you mentioned, ROI. I'm curious to know how you measure ROI, if you measure ROI, and if that's important to secure leadership support.
Yeah, well, CFO is obviously a very important person that's at the table when the decisions are being made. In the organizations that I've worked with and that I've consulted for, obviously the CFO has a vested interest in asking the ROI question, but so many of the organizations that I've worked with, WPS too, it's not really about the hard, tangible ROI. It is really about creating an engaged group of employees that feel genuinely that you care about them, and if you've got the heads and hearts engaged, there's no substitute. I mean, member experience. So, we have a customer service team. They're on the phone with our members, right? You want them to be happy. You want them to be enthusiastic when they're on the phones. You want them to convey empathy, just in the way that they're being treated. So, I mean, there's a direct flow through. There's a flow through in the financials. People are usually more productive when they're more engaged. So, no hard ROI, and it's not something where you're going to get to the end of 12 months and go, okay, I can show you that, right? But it's the right thing to do, and especially if it's congruent with your mission. And just the value that you place on your employees too, and having a stable and engaged workforce. Absolutely. The turnover rate can be a real killer for the organization. So, I mean, that has ROI attached to it as well. But if you really have a mission-oriented organization and you have an executive leadership team or leaders that really buy into this, I've never found that to be just a really significant barrier. And I think too, if you measure your employee engagement scores over time, that's sort of the real metric to pay attention to, because you're going to see exactly the trajectory of that and what happens over time when you really take an approach that's authentic, and empathetic with your employees. So I think that's where you see the metric, the most important one.
Gail, you're nodding.
Yeah, I would agree. The things that had come to mind for me were talent attraction and retention, and turnover, and then utilization of the programs that we have in place. But we're not asked to track necessarily ROI on those programs, although we do, obviously our CFO is involved in our benefits committee as well. And we do look at our utilization reports, and that's really how we've built our wellness center too, is what are those things that our employees are doing time and time again where we can cut down costs to our healthcare and bring that in-house, right? That's where we're seeing the ROI. And if we're seeing less spend on external physical therapy and we're building that in, or lab draws and things like that, that's where we're seeing our ROI.
You know, I think this is something that's changed over time too. I can remember past sessions where we focused so much on trying to figure out what's the ROI of wellness. And I mean, people just turn themselves inside out trying to figure that out or demonstrate that. And let me just poll the audience. Do you agree? Is this a trend that's changed, or are you still focused on measuring the ROI of health and well-being initiatives in your organizations? That wasn't a very good poll question. I just realized that as I was saying it. Anybody have a thought about that?
I would say that my struggle is getting, Mike. I would say my struggle is getting my clients to that point. Like, it's not just an ROI. And yes, we do need to be, sensible with how we spend our money and do things like that, but it's not about only that, right? So that it has to be a piece of your puzzle, but it can't be the only piece.
And when you say your clients, who are your clients?
I'm
Just so we
a
can
consultant broker, so
okay.
my employers that I'm working with as we develop these strategies and focus on wellness and well-being and your site DPCs, those types of things, that it's not just about the ROI. It's also about engagement. It's about recruitment and retention. It's about doing the right thing for your employees, providing them with access. There's so many reasons to do the things that we're talking about.
Yes.
But some of them are very ROI. I can't get out of that space.
Anybody else have thoughts about this? Mike, over here. Is the caller there?
I was just going to say that we really focus on utilization, because if people are utilizing some of the programs that we have in place, the theory is that it really does help with the ROI. For example, like we've helped with like diabetes. We make diabetic medication and durable medical equipment free to our employees and members. Well, we can't really tell if later on, if somebody's going to have some type of condition later on, but if we're making their, the access available to them, then we check to see, have they been utilizing it? Have they been staying on their regimens? And if they are, most likely the ROI is there later on.
Yeah. So kind of relying on intermediate indicators. Good. Can you share any personal experiences or lessons learned in your role as a leader in promoting employee well-being? How have they shaped your approach to leadership?
Yeah, I alluded to this earlier. I think just, like I said, it starts with people on a human level and getting to know them as individuals in your teams. And I think just through the work that you do, I think it has to start with building trust and the vulnerability. And one of the very first things I do, the Power of Why through Simon Sinek, I do that with new teams that I lead or I get involved with all the time. And I usually start with my stories. And my dad was diagnosed with lung cancer in 2016, and I thought I knew everything that there was to know about healthcare. I was an executive at a health insurance company. Like, this shouldn't, it's shocking when you hear the diagnosis. And I'm like, how long for you to get in to see an oncologist? He's like, well, 6 weeks. I'm like, that's unacceptable. So I go into my colleague's office next door, and he is responsible for provider contracting and network management. And I'm like, is this normal? And he's like, yeah, unfortunately it is. And I said, can you help me? And I had my dad in to see the oncologist within 2 days. And so I felt incredibly blessed. I also felt incredibly guilty. Like, look at all the people with loved ones who can't get in to see a doctor that fast. So, and we, 2 years on this journey of being in emergency rooms and oncology offices and primary care offices and so I was so frustrated, and I was passionate about healthcare before that, but after all of that is just like, yeah, it's incredibly frustrating, and so yeah, I think at the end of the day for me, my mission is just to ensure that we have a healthcare system that is worthy of our friends and our family, and we are not there, and we have a distance to go, but I know we can do it. I don't know if I answered your question, but it's kind of what sits at the heart
Yes,
of.
exactly. I mean, personal experiences or lessons learned along the way that have influenced you as a leader.
Yeah, back to your question. So yeah, I do. I share my journey, and I find that it opens other people on my team to open up too and share. There's power in sharing our stories, right? And it gives us kind of a common cause to rally behind, to remind ourselves why we're in this and why we're doing this.
Doing the work.
What advice, this will be my wrap-up question, and then any from the audience as well, what advice would you offer to other leaders who are looking to create a workplace environment that really supports and actively promotes the health and well-being of employees?
I think the biggest piece of advice I have is to create a program that's authentic to your company, and to create programming that you will truly support and that leadership will support, right? Because a lot of times I have seen this, and companies will create programs because this sounds good, it looks good on paper, it's enticing to bring people in, but if you can't have your leadership team truly support it and participate in it and allow others to participate in it, I think then it can create distrust. So for instance, if you are offering workout classes or you're offering different programming during the day, but you're making it hard for your employees to get to it, or not supporting them in doing it, or not showing your support of them doing it, it sends that alternate message. It's important.
Yes. Rochelle, anything?
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I think the other element of this is just being intentional. Listening to employees, like you said, being intentional about what you're doing, not trying to do too many things, and staying focused and experiment, right? Not everything is going to work, so you need to be willing to fail a little bit and recalibrate and rethink things, and just get feedback all along the way from your employees on the journey. How is it working for them? How are they engaging? And I think the last piece is time. You've got to be persistent as you're taking your company on this journey and with your employees, and be intentional, and to create time and space for your employees too. So if you have a on-site clinic, or we're creating programs in the workplace or virtually, are we giving our employees time during the day to actually utilize the programs or engage the way we want them to? I just find, I don't know what your guys' schedule is, but you're like back to back to back to back in 30-minute meetings. And it's equally as important for leaders to participate in programs and the people that report to us, right? We can't be good leaders unless we're taking care of ourselves and setting examples, for the people that report to us and that we work with.
That is a challenge.
That's a huge challenge.
And that is something that I experience in more of a virtual environment that's intensified. There's no time between meetings. It's just meetings. In fact, okay, this is TMI, but I joke to our marketing team, who's always thinking about what tchotchke things should we give away? I said, how about catheters? What about Alliance catheters? Think of the time we would save.
So true, so true.
Questions from you? Yes.
I can just talk loud.
We're recording.
I'm Kevin. Thank you so much for the session. First, do you track the data of employees that are utilizing the wellness kind of options or extras that you provide for them? And then do you incentivize it for them? And how you handle those employees that aren't actually taking advantage of any of those options?
Yes, we do track, for sure. We don't track everything, but we try to track as much as we possibly can. And for instance, when we started, I'll use Know Your Numbers as an example. We definitely used the carrot, right? Trying to get people to come do Know Your Numbers. So we'd offer gift cards for those who would do it. Then we slowly transitioned to the stick, and we penalized people who didn't do Know Your Numbers. And then what we try to do really is to communicate and educate and tell people the why. So we talked about the why at the beginning, right? Why do we want to do this? We don't want your biometrics. We're not looking to track this information on you. For example, we want you to be healthy, and we want to catch something early if we can, to save your life, to save time, and of course to save money in the healthcare system too. So we've used a little bit of both, but I think that trying to get the why and the buy-in has been most beneficial to us in our programming.
Yeah, I would say similar, slightly different because we don't have the on-site clinic, but with the mental health focus that we've had different programs in place. We do monitor utilization. We try to get employee feedback to understand what's working and what's not, and we have made adjustments over time. As far as those folks that are choosing not to engage, it's a little bit different again when you're focused in the mental health space. It's hard to know exactly, out of all your employees who has challenges that they're dealing with and how you best help them. But, just again, through our employee engagement scores and kind of those day-to-day interactions and creating that environment of vulnerability, that's the best way that we kind of stay in touch with what's happening.
Do you have an experience to share from Merrill Steele? I think you said that's where you, oh, okay.
No, but I'm just curious. I was just curious because I have learned from some organizations that they do offer, discounts on specific premiums or whatever, however they're managing, if you do take advantage of these wellness opportunities. And I was just curious if that was part of any of your plans.
Thank you. Other questions? All right, in that case, we can wrap up. I think we're just about at time. I want to thank both of you for being here today. Thank you so much for your expertise.
Absolutely, thank you.